Maria had always prided herself on being a woman of patience, a woman of understanding. She had learned early on in life that the key to peace was compromise, and compromise was a trait that had shaped her marriage. At 35, Maria had been married to Daniel for nearly 10 years. Their home was a quaint two-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with a garden that she tended to every morning before work, a habit that grounded her. She had always been the picture of the devoted wife, caring, attentive, loving. On the surface, Maria's life seemed almost too perfect. She had a stable job as a graphic designer for a small marketing agency, and Daniel worked as a financial analyst at a prestigious firm. The two of them shared their daily routines, the ebb and flow of their lives, and the small comforts of a long-term relationship. Shared cups of coffee, whispered goodnight kisses, and the unspoken knowledge that, though life wasn't always perfect, they had each other. But Maria could not shake the quiet feeling that something was missing. It wasn't anything she could pinpoint exactly. No glaring problems, no fights, no visible cracks in the foundation. It was a feeling that lingered just out of reach, like a distant echo of something she had once heard but couldn't quite remember. She had always tried to ignore it, choosing to focus on the blessings of her life, the warmth of their home, the laughter that sometimes filled it when they hosted friends over, the routine of their days together. But recently, the feeling had grown more insistent, like a subtle but persistent ache in her chest. Maria's days followed the same rhythm. She would wake up early, make breakfast for Daniel, then go to work, returning home in the evening to make dinner or settle in with a good book. It was a comfortable life, one she had come to enjoy and depend on. But there were times, especially when she was alone in their house, that the silence seemed to hold secrets, ones she couldn't name. The only sound in the house would be the soft ticking of the wall clock in the hallway, and Maria would often find herself lost in thought, trying to make sense of a sensation that lingered in the air. Her husband, Daniel, was a good man. He had always been supportive and kind, a reliable partner who made sure their bills were paid, that their house was safe, and that Maria wanted for nothing. In many ways, he was the perfect husband, a rock who was always there when she needed him. But recently, Maria had noticed something shifting in their relationship, a small change, almost imperceptible. Daniel seemed more distant, more caught up in his work, and the long nights he spent at the office were becoming more frequent. It wasn't that he was hiding anything obvious. He wasn't unfaithful or cruel, but there were small things, the fleeting glances, the way he would avoid eye contact when she spoke, or how he'd sometimes slip out of bed in the middle of the night without a word. The change was subtle, but it was enough to make Maria's heart race when she thought about it too much. It was as though there was a veil between them, one that she couldn't see through, but could certainly feel. And the more she tried to ignore it, the more the tension grew. One evening, after another quiet dinner, Maria decided to clean out some of the drawers in their bedroom. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary, just tidying up, organizing the things that had accumulated over the years. Daniel had never been one to keep his things in order, leaving papers, receipts, and other odds and ends scattered throughout the house. Maria had grown used to it over the years and had taken it upon herself to manage the clutter. As she opened one of his drawers in their shared dresser, something caught her eye. At first, it seemed insignificant. Just a small, glimmering object buried beneath a stack of old receipts and papers. But as she reached for it, her fingers brushed against something that felt more solid than the usual scraps of paper. Maria picked it up carefully and stared at it, her heart skipping a beat. It was an old wedding ring. The metal was worn, the band thin with age, but it had an unmistakable luster, a quality that suggested it had once held a much more significant place in someone's life. Maria's breath caught in her throat. It didn't belong to her. She knew that much immediately. She turned it over in her hands, feeling its cool surface against her palm. The ring wasn't hers. She hadn't seen it before. Maria's pulse began to race as she looked at it more closely. It wasn't a simple band. It had intricate engravings on it, small details that spoke of a history Maria couldn't remember, a past she had never been told about. At first, she thought it might be something Daniel had kept from his bachelor days, perhaps a forgotten trinket from an old relationship. But as her mind began to race, she realized that it couldn't be. Daniel had never mentioned anything about an old marriage or a lost love. She had always known him as her husband, her one and only. The thought that there might be someone hidden from her made her stomach tighten with unease. She clutched the ring in her hand, staring at it as though it could reveal its secrets. The questions began to pile up in her mind, each one more pressing than the last. Why was it in his drawer? Why had he never mentioned it? And more importantly, why was it there, now, after all these years? Maria stood frozen in place, the weight of the ring heavy in her hand. For the first time in years, she felt the ground beneath her tremble. The life she thought she knew, the marriage she thought was built on trust, was suddenly, irrevocably, cast into doubt. What was Daniel hiding? It was just a ring. But in that moment, Maria felt as though the entire foundation of her life was beginning to crack. Maria couldn't shake the image of the ring. Every time she closed her eyes, it was there, gleaming in her palm, a cold reminder that something was wrong. She had placed it carefully on the nightstand, unable to bring herself to put it back in the drawer, but also unable to fully face what it meant. Daniel had come home late that evening, his usual tired smile greeting her as though nothing was amiss. But Maria couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut, the ever-present sense that something had shifted in their world, in their marriage. The following morning, she sat with the ring in front of her while she ate breakfast, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug, the warmth of the tea doing nothing to calm her nerves. Daniel hadn't mentioned the ring, and Maria didn't know how to bring it up. She didn't even know what she'd say. "I found an old wedding ring in your drawer. Care to explain?" It sounded absurd, like something out of a mystery novel, yet the weight of it felt incredibly real. She decided to let it go, at least for now. She went about her day, trying to push the thought to the back of her mind, but it was impossible. The more she tried to focus on other things, the more intrusive the thought became. Why had he kept it? What if it wasn't from his past at all? The thought that it could be something recent, something that could tear apart everything they had built, began to haunt her. That evening, as they ate dinner together, Maria couldn't ignore the subtle shifts in their interactions. Daniel was distant again, his eyes glued to his phone, his responses brief and distracted. His usual warmth was absent, replaced by a coldness she hadn't felt before. It wasn't just the ring. It was the silence, the unspoken tension that filled the space between them. Maria made a decision. She couldn't ignore it anymore. She had to find out the truth. That night, after Daniel fell asleep beside her, Maria carefully picked up his phone from the nightstand. It wasn't something she had ever done before, but desperation clouded her judgment. She felt a mix of guilt and urgency as her fingers hovered over the device. She had to know. She unlocked his phone with ease. His password had always been the same, his birthday, and began to scroll through his messages, photos, and contacts. There was nothing overtly suspicious at first. Texts from work, updates from friends, casual conversations with colleagues. But then she stumbled upon something that made her stomach turn. A message thread. One that she didn't recognize. "Everything is ready for us tonight. I'll meet you at the usual place. I miss you." The message read, sent just a few days earlier. Maria's hands began to shake.
Who was he messaging?
The name at the top of the thread didn't ring a bell, and there were no other messages from this person to clue her in on who they were. Just those cryptic words. She scrolled up, finding more messages. Each one more intimate than the last. Words of affection, talk of secret meetings, plans to see each other soon. Her mind reeled. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't just a random name or some old flame. This was real. Daniel had been hiding something from her, someone from her. Her breath hitched, and she put the phone down quickly, as though the act of reading the messages had burned her fingers. What was she supposed to do with this information? How could she confront him without causing irreparable damage to everything they had built? And more pressing, who was this person? Why hadn't he told her about them? For the next few days, Maria found herself caught in a whirlwind of confusion and suspicion. She tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy, continuing with her work, engaging in small conversations with Daniel, but every word, every glance, felt loaded with a new meaning. The secrets, the lies, had woven themselves into the very fabric of her life. The ring, the phone messages, it was all too much to ignore now. She couldn't bear the uncertainty anymore. Late one night, after Daniel had once again slipped out to work late, Maria made a decision. She was going to confront him. She couldn't keep living in the dark, wondering. She needed answers. But there was one last piece of the puzzle she needed to understand. She had to know who the woman was, the mysterious figure in the messages. Maria couldn't help herself. She logged into social media, scanning profiles for any sign of a name that matched. She searched through hundreds of women, trying to find a clue, a photograph, anything that could connect the dots. And then, after what seemed like hours, she found it. A profile picture, beautiful, smiling, seemingly perfect. And there, in the bio, was her name, Sophie Blake. Maria stared at the image for a long time, her heart hammering in her chest. Sophie Blake. The name that had appeared in those texts. The name that had been shared with so much affection. Maria didn't know who Sophie Blake was, but she knew she had to find out. The lies, the deception, it was all building to something far larger than she had ever imagined. And now, with this new piece of the puzzle, Maria knew she was about to uncover a truth that would shatter everything she thought she knew about her husband and about herself. As Maria closed her laptop, her eyes welling with tears, the full weight of the situation descended on her. Her world, her perfect life, was beginning to crack apart at the seams. The truth, the painful truth, was closer than ever. Maria had never felt so uncertain, so torn. The truth she had uncovered about Daniel, about Sophie, was like a slow poison that had seeped into every part of her life. It was no longer just about a ring hidden in a drawer. It was about trust, betrayal, and a love she wasn't sure was real anymore. The uneasiness had settled into her bones, and the decision weighed heavily on her heart. What was she supposed to do now? Confront Daniel and risk tearing their entire life apart? Or keep silent, knowing that the truth was already eating away at the foundation of their marriage? For days, Maria was consumed by the decision. She felt like a stranger in her own home, each day dragging on as if the hours were stretched thin, like they were standing on the edge of something terrible, waiting for the fall. Daniel was acting more distant than usual. He no longer greeted her with the same affection or smiled the way he used to. The man she had married, the man she thought she knew, was slipping away before her very eyes, and she was left holding the pieces of a puzzle that made no sense. She couldn't talk to her friends about it, not yet. Who would understand the complexity of the situation? Who would believe her when she said her husband had been hiding an affair, when she couldn't even confirm that it was truly an affair? She couldn't let them in, not until she knew for sure. She needed more answers. She needed to see this through, no matter how much it hurt. Maria decided that she would confront Daniel, but not before she knew everything. It wasn't just about Sophie anymore, it was about how deep the lies went. She needed to know what Daniel had been hiding from her for all these months, what he hadn't told her, and most importantly, how long this affair had been going on. She couldn't just walk in blindly, asking questions that might only lead to more confusion. She had to be prepared. The next day, she spent hours combing through every social media account she could find linked to Sophie Blake. She learned everything she could about the woman, her work, her friends, her interests. Sophie wasn't just any stranger. She was someone who had a life that intertwined with Daniel's in ways Maria had never imagined. Their shared interests, the places they had been, and the messages exchanged, all of it pointed to a relationship that went beyond a brief fling. This was something that had been going on for much longer than Maria could have ever guessed. One name kept popping up in the posts and messages: Jacob. A man who appeared in Sophie's posts more often than Maria cared to admit. At first, Maria didn't think much of it. But the deeper she dug, the more she realized that Jacob wasn't just any acquaintance of Sophie's. He was someone Daniel knew, too. There were photos of the three of them, posing together at parties, smiling and laughing like old friends. The connection was there, hidden in plain sight all along. Maria felt her stomach twist.
What was going on between them?
Was Sophie just a casual fling, Or was it something far more serious? Daniel had lied to her about so many things, but this was a betrayal she couldn't easily brush off. It wasn't just about the affair. It was the fact that Daniel had involved someone from his life, someone she didn't even know existed in their marriage. The discovery of Jacob threw Maria's plan into chaos. If Daniel had been lying about Sophie, what else had he lied about? Had he been leading a double life all this time? She couldn't help but feel like the walls were closing in, and the truth was slipping further away from her grasp the more she tried to hold on to it. But Maria couldn't wait any longer. The moment of confrontation was drawing near. She had to face him, no matter how painful it might be. It wasn't just about her feelings anymore. It was about understanding the full picture, the truth behind the secrets he had kept from her, the secrets he had kept from their life together. That night, Maria stayed up late, pacing the living room. Her heart raced, her thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. She had no idea how Daniel would react when she finally asked him about the ring, the messages, or Sophie. Would he come clean, or would he deny everything, twisting the situation until she was the one questioning her own reality? She felt the weight of the unknown pressing against her chest. When Daniel walked through the door that evening, looking tired but otherwise unchanged, Maria knew it was time. She couldn't hold onto the facade of normalcy any longer. She had to face him, to demand the truth, no matter how much it terrified her. As they sat down at the kitchen table, the silence between them felt heavy. Daniel hadn't yet noticed the tension in the air, but Maria could feel it in her bones. She was on the verge of something that would alter everything. "Daniel," she started, her voice shaky but determined. "There's something I need to talk to you about." He looked up at her, his expression softening, though she could see the flicker of wariness in his eyes. "What's going on, Maria?" "I found something," she said, her voice cracking slightly as the words spilled out. "In your drawer. A ring." She paused, watching his face for any reaction. "It's an old wedding ring, Daniel. Whose is it?" His face immediately darkened, and Maria could see the walls he had built around himself start to rise. The warmth in his eyes was gone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice a little too calm. Maria didn't let him change the subject. She couldn't back down now. "Don't lie to me," she pressed, her pulse quickening. "I've seen the messages. I know about Sophie." Daniel's face froze. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of their breathing, the ticking of the clock on the wall. And then, in a quiet, almost defeated voice, he spoke. "You don't understand, Maria." And that was when she realized, with a sickening certainty, that the truth was about to destroy everything. The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Daniel's voice was quieter now, more strained, as if he knew this moment was inevitable. Maria's heart raced in her chest, her hands trembling as she clutched the edge of the table. The shock of the moment was still settling in her bones, but her instincts told her that she had finally reached the breaking point. "I don't understand," Maria repeated, her voice rising slightly. "I've been married to you for years, Daniel. I thought we had something real. But I found a wedding ring, your wedding ring, Daniel, in your drawer, and I know about Sophie. So what is it, huh? What have you been hiding from me all this time?" Daniel's face had drained of color, and for the first time, Maria saw a flicker of guilt in his eyes. It was fleeting, but it was there. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words failed him, as if the truth was too painful to voice. Maria pressed on, the anger and hurt now bubbling to the surface, threatening to spill over. "How long, Daniel? How long has this been going on?" she demanded. "You think I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't see the lies?" He looked away, his hands running through his hair in frustration. "It's not like that, Maria. You don't understand," he repeated, but this time his words felt hollow. "I never meant to hurt you." Maria felt the knot in her stomach tighten. She was already well past the point of holding back tears or trying to make sense of his excuses. The reality of his betrayal was too much to process, too much to comprehend. The man she thought she knew, the man she had built a life with, was unraveling before her eyes, and the truth of it was something she wasn't sure she could survive. "I deserve the truth, Daniel," she said through gritted teeth. No more lies. No more secrets. He inhaled sharply, his eyes meeting hers with an unreadable expression. Then, in a voice tinged with regret, he finally spoke the words Maria had been dreading to hear. It wasn't just Sophie, he said, his voice barely a whisper. There was someone else, another woman, before her. Someone I've been seeing for over a year. Maria's mind went blank. Her world tilted on its axis, and for a moment, the room felt as though it was spinning around her. She had known something was wrong. But this was a truth that was far more devastating than she could have ever imagined. It wasn't just one affair. It was a pattern, a web of deceit that Maria had been completely unaware of. Every whispered word, every stolen moment, was a lie that had been carefully hidden from her. You. Maria's voice trembled with disbelief. You've been seeing multiple women behind my back? For over a year? Her heart was pounding in her ears, and her thoughts felt disjointed. How had she not seen the signs? How had she been so blind? Daniel closed his eyes briefly, as if bracing himself for what came next. I was selfish, Maria. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing to you. Everything felt like it was slipping away. And then, with Sophie, it felt like I was finally being seen, finally getting the attention I thought I needed. But I was wrong. I was wrong to do this to you. Maria felt the weight of his confession crush her, but beneath the devastation, there was something else, something much darker. She wasn't just hurt by his actions. She was furious. Furious that he had torn apart the life they had built without a second thought. Furious that his lies had come to define their marriage. I've been nothing but loyal to you, Maria said, her voice trembling with anger now. I gave you everything, Daniel. And this is how you repay me? By betraying me over and over again? You don't get to just apologize and make it all better. Her voice cracked as the realization hit her. She didn't recognize this man in front of her anymore. The man who had promised to love and cherish her had become someone else, someone she didn't know. She had been living a lie, and every moment of trust she had placed in him now felt like an illusion. Daniel's eyes filled with guilt, but the damage was done. There were no words that could undo the hurt. I'm so sorry, Maria. I know I've lost you. I never wanted to hurt you like this. Maria shook her head, her chest tightening with emotion. It's too late for apologies, Daniel. I don't even know who you are anymore. The silence between them stretched out, thick with pain. The love that had once been the foundation of their life together now felt like a distant memory, something unreachable, lost in the rubble of his lies. But as Maria sat there, the weight of the moment sinking in, another realization struck her. She wasn't just hurt by his betrayal. She was devastated because she had allowed herself to stay in the dark for so long, convincing herself that everything was fine, that their love was unbreakable. But in the end, it wasn't just Daniel who had failed their marriage, it was also her for not seeing the signs earlier. In that moment, Maria knew that her life would never be the same again. The woman who had trusted her husband, who had believed in their future together, was gone. The person sitting across from Daniel now was someone who had been forever changed by the truth. You need to leave, Daniel, Maria said, her voice quiet but firm. I need space. I need to figure out who I am without you. Daniel's face twisted with regret, but he didn't argue. He stood slowly, his movements heavy with the weight of their shattered world. As he walked toward the door, Maria couldn't bring herself to look at him anymore. She couldn't bear to see the man who had destroyed everything she had believed in. When the door clicked shut behind him, Maria collapsed onto the couch, her body trembling with the realization of what had just transpired. She felt like she was floating in a sea of emotions, anger, sadness, confusion, and yet, beneath it all, there was a strange sense of clarity. She had been betrayed, but now, for the first time in what felt like forever, she was free. Days passed, and Maria found herself navigating a world that felt foreign. The house was too quiet without Daniel's presence, and though she had asked him to leave, the emptiness that filled the spaces between the walls was louder than any conversation they had ever had. It was as if his absence spoke louder than the words they had exchanged in that moment of confrontation. But Maria knew that this was the beginning of something new. She didn't know yet how she would heal or what steps she would take next, but she understood that she had to rebuild her life, piece by piece. The woman she was before Daniel's betrayal no longer existed. She had to face herself, confront her own choices, and begin to rebuild the life she had put on hold for so long. In the weeks that followed, Maria focused on herself. She spent time with friends, sought therapy, and reconnected with the things she had once loved but had forgotten in the rush of her marriage. Slowly, she rediscovered who she was outside of the role of wife, outside of the image of the woman who had been blindly faithful to a man who had never truly been honest with her. She filed for divorce. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Daniel's lies had stolen too much from her, and though she still loved him in some twisted part of her heart, she knew that she could never go back. The truth had shattered everything, and with it, she was left with the difficult but empowering task of rebuilding her own life from the ground up. As Maria walked away from the ruins of her marriage, she was no longer just a woman wronged. She was someone who had survived. And in that survival, she found strength, clarity, and the realization that no matter how much the truth hurt, it was the only thing that would set her free. With time, the pain of betrayal would fade, but the lesson would remain with her forever. Trusting someone with your heart was a gift. And when that trust was broken, the only thing you could do was walk away and rebuild.